It began on a Friday soaked in shadows. Jerusalem trembled beneath storm-thick skies, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. At the foot of 3 wooden crosses, a Roman centurion stood cold and still. His name was Longinos. His orders were clear: oversee the death of another Jewish rebel, another execution, another day. But when the hammer struck wood and blood kissed stone, something ancient stirred in the bones of the earth. Jesus of Nazareth, silent and broken, looked heavenward and cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That moment carved a wound into time, and into Longinos. He was no stranger to blood. Longinos had climbed Rome's brutal ladder, forged in violence and baptized in war. As centurion, he commanded over 100 men. He was respected, feared, and merciless. His eyes had seen towns burn, rebels crushed, and enemies beg for life. But the eyes of this condemned man, Jesus, held no fear, no hatred, only a strange, unbearable peace. It unnerved him. This was not how men died. This was not how Rome's enemies broke. Longinos had pierced thousands with his sword, but he had never seen a man take pain like a priest offering sacrifice. The trial had been political theater. The Jewish priests condemned him, but couldn't kill him. So they passed the burden to Pilate, Rome's pawn in Judea. Pilate knew the man was innocent. Even his wife dreamed of it, warning him to stay away from this righteous one. But politics don't favor conscience. When the crowd cried, "Crucify him," Pilate washed his hands in front of them. Rome had spoken. Jesus would die. Longinos, stationed at the garrison, received the order like any other: escort the criminal, ensure the crucifixion. And so the execution began, not just of a man, but of history itself. Jesus didn't resist the whip. His silence screamed louder than any plea. Stripped of robes, back torn by lash, mocked with thorns and purple cloth, Jesus was paraded before the laughing soldiers. One spat, another struck him with a reed. "Hail, King of the Jews," they sneered. But Longinos didn't join. He watched. His hardened eyes couldn't explain it, but something inside him recoiled, not from the violence. He'd seen worse, but from the serenity, the terrifying dignity in this bloodied man's eyes, as if he saw beyond them, as if he was enduring pain that served a purpose only he understood. The road to Golgotha was narrow and soaked in sweat. Jesus stumbled. The cross crushed his back, bones grinding against splinters. People screamed. Others wept. Longinos barked orders, pushing the crowd aside. When Jesus collapsed again, Longinos pulled a bystander from the crowd, a man named Simon, to carry the cross. That decision would echo in eternity. As they walked, Jesus turned to the women who wept and said, "Don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves." Longinos flinched. Who thinks of others with a back flayed open? Who bleeds and comforts? The contradictions dug into him like splinters under armor. At the hill, the wood stood waiting. Nails, iron, death. Jesus didn't beg, didn't curse. His hands stretched open, not in surrender but in offering. The soldiers nailed him down, and with a sickening thud the cross was raised. The crowd mocked him. One thief cursed him, but another, face swollen, voice cracked, defended him. "This man has done nothing wrong," he said. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And then from the dying man at the center, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Longinos felt something crack inside him. It wasn't a nail. It was doubt. Darkness fell at midday. A cosmic silence swallowed Jerusalem. The earth groaned beneath them. Lightning clawed the sky. Longinos stood guard, but his sword felt useless, as if the world itself was protesting what he had done. Then came the words, not a curse, not a scream, but a prayer. "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Forgiveness for the torturers, for the killers, for him. Longinos turned cold. That forgiveness pierced deeper than any blade. He had not asked for it. He had not earned it. But it was given freely, like blood running down a sacred hill. The final moments arrived with a whisper and a cry. "It is finished," Jesus said, as if declaring victory, not defeat. Then he gave up his spirit. Longinos watched as the temple veil in Jerusalem tore in two. The earth shook, rocks split, people screamed, but Longinos knelt, unarmed, unmasked, unready. He looked at the lifeless body of Jesus and muttered words he never believed he'd say. Truly, this man was the Son of God. His voice broke. His knees trembled. The executioner had become a witness. The killer had become the first Gentile to confess the divinity of the crucified. But the law was merciless. The Sabbath neared. The Jews demanded the legs of the crucified be broken to quicken death. Orders came, and Longinos obeyed. The other two men screamed as bones shattered. But when he came to Jesus, he saw the stillness. He knew. Still, law required proof. So Longinos took his spear and thrust it into Jesus' side. Blood and water poured out, unnatural, pure, holy. Some say it splashed on his face, on eyes long clouded by war. And in that moment, Longinos could see again, not just the world, but the truth. He hadn't pierced a man. He had pierced heaven. He fell again, not as soldier, but as soul, weeping, shaking. And somewhere in that trembling silence, he made a choice. He could return to camp, report completion, collect rations. But how does a man return to killing after killing God? Longinos didn't. He disappeared from the ranks of Rome. His name was scratched off duty logs. But his story had just begun. He wandered the edges of Jerusalem, listening to whispers, rumors that Jesus was not in the tomb, that people had seen him, spoke with him, touched his wounds, and Longinos believed. Because death had not broken that man. Nothing could. He couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe right, couldn't speak the name without tears. The man he killed still lived, in the words of those who followed him, in the fire that now burned under Longinos' skin. He searched for the disciples, begged to know more. He wasn't afraid. He was desperate, to understand, to redeem, to follow. He no longer wore the steel of empire, only the ashes of repentance. And when he found them, those men who ran from the cross, he did not accuse, he wept. I was there, he told them. I pierced his side, and he forgave me. The room fell silent. They didn't know what to make of him at first. A Roman? Here? Claiming he believed? But when Longinos spoke, the room changed. He didn't preach. He confessed. Not with pride, but with trembling conviction. I saw him die, he said, but in his death I saw life. The disciples, still afraid and hiding, saw something in him they had lost. Clarity. Not the clarity of a theologian, but of a man who had blood on his hands and found forgiveness. He wasn't seeking status. He wasn't asking for absolution. He was looking for a new name, a new purpose, a new king. So he stayed. Not as soldier, but as servant. He washed the feet of those he once might have chained. He listened to Peter speak of denial, to John speak of love, to Mary Magdalene speak of resurrection. Each story stitched something back together inside him. The spear that once pierced Christ's side had become the thorn in his own. He carried it not as a relic, but as a reminder of who he was and who he could be. They baptized him in silence. When he emerged, he wept not from guilt, but from grace, and his past began to drown. But Rome doesn't forget, and Rome doesn't forgive. News of the centurion's disappearance reached the ears of commanders. A decorated officer had abandoned post. Worse, he had joined a heresy growing like wildfire in the back alleys of Jerusalem. They branded him a traitor. Spies were dispatched, bounties were posted. But Longinos no longer ran from death. He had seen the eyes of a man who welcomed it and understood its place in the story. He walked into danger with the calm of a man who had already died once and been born again on a blood-soaked hill. He traveled north to Antioch, east to Cappadocia. No longer commanding men, he gathered hearts. Villages would whisper, "That's the soldier, the one from the cross." and Longinos would nod and say, "Yes, I was blind, and now I see." His words were not sermons, they were wounds that spoke. "I didn't believe in miracles," he would say, "but I saw one die, and I saw a world change." He preached with no temple, no scrolls, no silver tongue, only memory, only fire. And people listened because he wasn't quoting scripture. He was living it, breath by breath, scar by scar. Many converted, some mocked, others plotted. The same empire that taught Longinos to kill now demanded his silence. He refused. "I served Caesar," he told them, "but I belong to a greater king now." He was arrested under Roman orders, dragged to the edge of a forgotten city. They beat him, interrogated him, offered him freedom if he denied the name. He didn't. "I cannot deny the one who forgave me," he said. "I cannot betray the eyes that looked at me without hate." The guards, once his brothers in arms, saw no fear in him, only peace that defied understanding. They tried to break him, but he had already been broken, on that hill, in that hour, beneath that sky. And from those broken pieces, faith had risen like stone from rubble. When they dragged him to the place of execution, he didn't resist. Some say he sang, others say he wept, but none deny he walked upright, like one who knew exactly where he was going. They offered him one last chance. Deny Jesus, live again. He looked up, smiled, and said, "I saw him look death in the eye. I will do the same." And he bowed his head. The blade fell. Silence followed. The same silence that once blanketed Golgotha now hovered again, but this time it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like completion. The executioner stepped back. One guard whispered, "He didn't scream." Another asked, "What did he see?" None could answer. But the earth seemed to hold its breath, once more, as if acknowledging the fall of a soul it had once cursed and now redeemed. His body was buried in the fields of Cappadocia. No tomb of kings, just dirt and stone. But soon, people began to gather. They said miracles happened there, healings, visions. They called him a saint, Saint Longinos. The man who held the spear became the man who carried the gospel, from butcher to believer, from soldier to martyr. His name spread, not in scrolls of conquest, but in the whispers of the faithful. His spear, once feared, became a relic. His story, once tragic, became hope. For every man who had sinned too deeply, who had gone too far, who thought redemption wasn't for them, Longinos was proof. You could pierce heaven and still be forgiven. You could kill the Son of God and still be loved. That is what grace means. But his story didn't end alone. It passed from mouth to mouth, generation to generation, reaching us, right now. Not to marvel at a man, but to ask a question. Who are you in this story? The crowd, the soldier, the thief, the disciple hiding in fear? Are you the one who mocks, or the one who kneels? Because in Longinos we see ourselves, flawed, violent, blind, but also chosen, forgiven, sent. If a Roman killer can fall to his knees and rise again as a saint, what then is impossible? What excuse do we have not to believe, not to change, not to kneel? And so as the centuries pass, his name lives not in marble, but in blood and truth, not in statues, but in the hearts of those who understand what it means to be redeemed. Longinos died by the sword he once mastered, but he lived by the love he once crucified. And his story ends the same way every great story of faith begins, with a man at the foot of the cross looking up and whispering, "Truly, this was the Son of God. And now it is your turn. The spear is no longer in your hand. The choice is..."